So there's this world-class wrestler and true Oregon badass you've probably never heard of. Her toughness and grit set a new precedent in wrestling that eventually helped save the world's oldest sport from a slow extinction. Meet Asia DeWeese. Asia grew up in Southern Oregon, where she was introduced to wrestling in her PE class. She loved it, and when she got to high school, she decided to join the team. Just to be clear, this was the 80s. There were no girls' wrestling teams.
So it was all guys and me. I'd never done wrestling, but I found that I really enjoyed it, and then I was pretty good at it.
And the school had to let her wrestle because of a law called Title IX. And she was good at it.
When the referee raised my hand, that was the ultimate high. It was the greatest feeling I had ever had at that point.
And the more she won, the more boys forfeited matches just to avoid her.
Yes, it made me very angry because in order to get to a tournament, I had to practice all the time they practiced. And for me to have done all that work to be there and then you won't wrestle me.
People didn't take her too seriously.
But when I started winning,
all of a sudden it became a problem. Title IX made it illegal to tell Asia she couldn't wrestle because of her gender, so the OSAA took a different approach and told Asia she couldn't wrestle because of her long hair. So Asia took them to court with the help of the ACLU, and
we lost that case.
But that didn't stop her.
I told myself that if I lost the case, that I would cut my hair.
So she did. During her senior year, Asia went on a student exchange to Thailand where she trained in judo and kickboxing. One day her coach called her. He said there was going to be this tournament in San Francisco. It was kinda experimental to see if there were any women out there wrestling in the US. And if there were, send them to the second ever Women's Wrestling World Championships in 1989. It was the first time US women would ever compete. So Asia came back to the US. She went to the tournament in San Francisco, qualified, and went to the World Championships in Switzerland. She wrestled her way through the tournament and made it all the way to the finals, where she took second in a loss that still stings.
I felt like I was a loser, that I didn't, I was really upset walking up to the podium. You were the last loser, basically. Second place felt like that.
Back in Oregon, Asia vowed to come back and win next year. She enrolled at U of O, approached the coaching staff, and asked them to let her join the wrestling team so she could train.
All the girls looked at each other and went, huh? I don't know. I'm very grateful that they said yes.
Asia became the first and only woman to ever wrestle at U of O.
But I had to make the team. Yes, I had to be able to prove I belonged there, which was tough.
One day at practice, Asia's nose was smashed by a teammate. Blood and snot streamed down her face into her already sweaty shirt, and still, she refused to quit or even leave practice.
That, I think, was a turning moment. I think that the coaches were impressed with my ability to keep fighting.
But by the time the next tournament rolled around in 1990, Asia was wrestling through a lot of pain. It wasn't one specific injury.
Again, quitting was not an option. And I was getting pretty beat up.
Asia barely qualified for the World Championships in Sweden. She competed and took 5th. But when she returned to U of O, the pain in her shoulder became unbearable.
They did an MRI, and I remember exactly when the doctor came back and there was a meeting room. He said, you have, a destroyed disc, your bone on bone on your vertebrae, and you can't wrestle again. You're done.
Asia was so disoriented by the news, she crashed her bike into the back of a truck on her way home.
I went into a pretty severe depression at that point.
So she left the country and traveled around the world teaching English and working as a linguist. Wrestling never left her DNA.
I would take a job in Saudi Arabia. I would show up and I had no idea where I was going to sleep that night, and I could tell myself, I can do this, I wrestled.
But Asia never wrestled in a competition again. Meanwhile, wrestling started to decline rapidly. College programs across the US were cut, including at Asia's own alma mater.
I thought for a while that it would come back, and it didn't.
Critics often blamed these cuts on Title IX. Their arguments usually accused schools of cutting wrestling teams to meet Title IX requirements, which didn't always make sense. U of O just replaced wrestling with baseball, and the law itself actually discouraged the elimination of teams. Instead of seeing Title IX as an opportunity to grow wrestling and include more people like Asia, it was seen as the villain in an ongoing battle to save a dying sport. Later, back in the United States, Asia started a career in teaching and coaching, and something interesting was happening in her sport. More and more girls were taking it up, and the more girls wrestled, the more wrestling as a whole started to recover. Asia was a professor at Umpqua Community College when she helped bring wrestling to the school. She launched the new program and became the head coach of UCC's inaugural women's wrestling team, only 15 minutes down the road from her old high school. UCC joined a wave of schools adding both men's and women's teams to their athletic departments. Wrestling started to make a comeback, and the growth, fueled by an exploding number of girls in the sport, continues today. For every up and down through almost 4 decades, Asia was there pushing her sport forward, simply because she loved to wrestle. She carried the weight of being a first in a time when she wasn't welcome.
I could never quit, because if I quit, it meant girls quit. It meant girls couldn't take it.
But every time she could have given up, she didn't. And eventually, the sport caught up with her. On March 2nd, 2023, women's wrestling officially became eligible for NCAA championship status. And on April 3rd, Oregon officially sanctioned girls wrestling at the high school level.
What I'm most proud of is not my own personal medal. I'm most proud of being part of a group of women who founded and started women's wrestling being accepted in this country. It teaches that you can do more than you think you can.